4 of the Polished Draft with Kyle Young. Again, we're looking at my book, The Last Wave Son. It's a fantasy novel, and it's in its first draft, but it's been very helpful so far in finding some of the things that I do wrong that I see in a lot of drafts that people send me as an agent to review to see if I want to represent them. And so the Polished Draft is what you do right before you want to send something out to an agent to try to get them to represent you, or to a publisher to get them to purchase your book. And this is part 4, and we're talking about weed words. Now, weed words are those words that keep appearing over and over and over again in your book, like weeds in the yard. And you just can't seem to get rid of them. And even though you try, they keep coming back. And so in my polished draft process, I recommend in stage 4 that you search for weed words. And I've learned to be pretty particular about this. I tried to eliminate all but one occurrence of each weed word per chapter. Now, that can be very difficult because when you get a look at the weed word list that I've compiled here, it's a long list. This is the weed word list, and I go through it and I make sure, as a resource, I try to make sure that every one of these words is not in the document too many times. And these are weed words, and it's not an exhaustive list. Unfortunately, you probably have words that you use over and over again that are not in this list. You would need to add them to your own list of weed words and find out what you use. But these are the common ones that keep coming up. And so we'll look at a couple, and we'll try and see them in my document, The Last Wave Son. So simply, I write in Scrivener, but I export to Word for this. If you have a program like Scrivener, you can search in there. But you just begin going through your document, looking for some of these words. So for me, I'll kind of look for the word eyes. I have eyes appears here, and oftentimes for this, I'll just kind of zoom out on my document and try to see as much of it here. I have eyes right here. I have eyes right here. I have eyes right here. This is in chapter. This is the end of my first chapter. In the last 3 pages, I have eyes appear 3 times. In the other parts of that chapter, I have a total of eyes appearing 4 times in that chapter. What I would do in this process of weeding it out, I would delete 3 of those and replace them with some other description, some other way to say it. So if I zoom in a little bit so I can read it, he knelt low and looked into his eyes. He doesn't have to look into his eyes. He could look at his face. He could look into his pupils. He could look into the mesmerizing blue pools or whatever may fit. His mom kept wiping tears from her eyes. I don't need to say eyes there. It's more of a prepositional phrase. I could say that his mom wiped her tears off, and that's totally fine. Here, he turned to Papa's hug while tears formed in his eyes. Tears form, only one place that tears form, the one place that tears form are in your eyes. So again, it's another phrase that I don't need to have. And, that's important. And Avo's eyes went wide. Here, I might edit that one out because Avo actually can't see his eyes go wide. And if I'm in deep POV in my character's head, he would have to feel his eyes going wide, but I might talk about how I could feel the skin on his eyes stretch as he was surprised, or I could feel his brow raise, as he kind of investigates this scenario. And then I look in the next chapter. I have so far 1, 2, 3, 4 instances also in the next chapter, so I would need to change them. And so I would kind of investigate that, and I would change each of those, and then I can do another search here. I'll search for the word gaze. I'll just pick a random word out of it. I have gaze once in this chapter. And I'll be honest, I've been really nitpicky about my work. I used to use the word look all the time. So I've tried to become very good about writing without the word look and using all these other forms. But so I have gaze once in there. I have look here. Look's one that a lot of times I see over and over again. This chapter I have look, and I have onlookers, which is not the same. So I have looked onlookers. I have onlookers twice. I might reconnect that. And I have looked twice and look once. So I would probably get rid of one of those in the chapter on the version of looked there, or looked, and to kind of clean it up. In the second chapter, it looks like I have looking, and I have looks, and I have looked again. So I might get rid of 1 or 2 of those, depending on what is actually going on in the sentence. Avo looked at the dagger for a sill, which is like a second. I could say he examined the dagger, he glanced at it, he gazed at it. He focused on, and it's a simple way to change that look out to a much stronger word there. Let's pick one more. Let's pick the word that. And I kind of scroll through. I have, he was better. He couldn't believe it. He knew he was better than that boy. Well, which boy? You'd have to know that. But if it's Amel Farkirk here, who the character is in the story, then I would probably say that he was better, needing to say he was better than Amel and not say that boy, because that is not a strong word. Avos, I don't know why that would be awful. He's speaking. And for me, a lot of times when it's in my character's dialogue, I'm a little bit more lenient with leaving it in than I am if it's just in my writing. Like here I have, he knew in his heart that one day, then I say that day, and then I say in a myth that Papa later renounced. I would take two of those, if not all three of those, because they're that's, and that's a weak word to use in the first place. I would edit them out with something much stronger. And so I just went through each of these long lines here, and I just found a half dozen or a dozen different words. Here we go, that. If I look at that, so I got probably a dozen of them here that I'm going to need to edit out to make my book stronger. What I recommend, even though I don't know that everybody does it, I recommend you going through every single word on this list and try to make your first 3 chapters as strong as possible before you submit it out. That means looking at body parts, looking at colors, looking at actions. If you're writing battle sequences and you have sword fighting, you're probably going to have characters get hit in different parts. So you may need to search or add other parts to this list. You need to search prepositions. You need to search, up and down. You need, if you're talking about left and right, ugly, pretty. There's just a whole bunch of lists that you need to look at. And that's kind of how you go through the weed words. And you search for all of these weed words to make sure that you don't struggle with them, or they don't keep reappearing in your writing and make somebody think that you don't have a great command of word usage, because you want to be a writer who uses a lot of different words to make your writing as strong as possible. So I encourage you to take a look at the weed word list that I have, and you can go through your own draft and investigate whether these are your weed words or if you have some of your own that you need to edit out of your document. Good luck, and stay tuned for how to check for deep POV.